So, okay, culture clash. All right. So what we're talking about here, well, what is a culture clash? It's when the way I do things conflicts with the way somebody else does something, right? Like when you get married, the culture clash there. That's not the way we always did it. Well, that's not the way we always did it. Or when somebody goes to a new church after they've been at a church for a long time. Well, that's just not the way we do things. When you move to another part of the country, when you've lived in a different part of the country. Well, that's just not it's a culture clash. And there's a culture clash that happens between us and God. So we've looked at the struggle we all face between not being like the culture around us, the society around us, and trying to be like God instead. We've been looking at this for a few weeks because there's quite a few struggles we're having. We're having a struggle in being separate from the society around us, but also we're having a little bit of a struggle because we don't want to follow God in here. We want to follow us in here. You know what I mean? We want to say that zinger. We want to post that comment. We want to hold that grudge. We want to, throw that thing. We have this thing that we want to do, and it's this constant war. Whoever said that people are basically good and that if you just look inside you'll find the truth, they were lying to you. I don't know how else to tell you that. I mean, man, oh man, if I looked inside, I'm fairly certain that, there'd be a lot more dead squirrels around Tularosa. So probably looking inside is not the best, not the best option you got. We've looked at a lot of important aspects about Jesus, and it's kind of hard to look at Jesus because there's so many different things you could say. Like in this series, I mean, how do I narrow down just a few things for us to pay attention to about Jesus? But much of what I've talked about in regards to Jesus is more of an idea than a specific thing. You know what I mean? Like, what Jesus was like, what he was about. Well, you really can't narrowly define him. You know what I mean? Like, oh, well, I have full understanding about Jesus, and this is what he was like. There's such depth to Jesus and to the things that he said. You could spend the rest of your life just studying Jesus, the four Gospels, and you'd always find something new. I mean, I'm saying throw away the rest of the entire Bible and just focus on the Gospels, and there's so much there to grasp that your entire life you'd never see the end of it. And I kind of feel like this is where the guy who wrote the book of John was at when he made this statement. He said, I haven't said everything that Jesus did. If I did, I'm pretty sure that not even all the books in the whole world could contain it. And I think that this is kind of where it was coming from, and just seeing that a lot of the things that Jesus said when he was on earth, the disciples didn't even really necessarily understand it until he was gone, and they're like, oh, that's what he meant. Like, for instance, the part where he said, I'm going to go to Jerusalem and die. He said it pretty clearly. Like, I don't even know how many times. And each time they're just like, wait. That wasn't the plan, was it? John, was that the plan? And so it's really hard to talk about that. So, okay, so being a Christian is following Jesus, okay, but definitely not perfectly, right? Because we do definitely mess up. But definitely continually. So although we're not doing it perfectly, we are doing it continually. We keep getting up, we keep trying, we keep pursuing after him, but that's really hard. So we're gonna close this up tonight, okay? The first week we looked at thinking like Jesus. The big idea that I had there was seeing value in people. The week after that, we talked about talking like Jesus, not just shooting your mouth off and saying stupid things, tearing people down, being productive with your words, being wise with what you say. The third week, we looked at acting like Jesus. This is where I was talking about making time for people rather than getting dead set into your schedule. When your life is gone, it's not going to be about a to-do list that you marked off things. It's not going to be about how many things you accumulated. We all have that thing that we want, right? Maybe it's books. For me, it's books. Or maybe it's, if you worship Satan, it's ebooks. I'm just kidding. I hate ebooks. I like the feel of paper and the smell, and sometimes I just walk into a bookstore and go, okay, I'm good. See ya. So obviously the quarantine was especially rough on me because they're all like, you got to wear masks. And I'm like, can I just take it off for just a second just to breathe in? And I'll put it back on to breathe out. Just, yeah, they didn't go for it, so there was that. We looked at, the week after that, we looked at loving Jesus. So that was last week. Loving like Jesus. And the big idea there was more or less just kind of having that surrendering yourself for the betterment of others, that humble nature that God had, or Jesus specifically. So tonight we're looking at planning like Jesus. Now, this is something that I tried when I was writing this to say it like 15 different ways to try and get across what I was saying, and I really don't think that I did. So we're just going to kind of plow through, and I'm just going to read them without break or pause, all 15 of the different... No, I'm just kidding. I'm joking. I'm not going to do that. That's terrible. They actually tell you in public speaking classes, don't do that. So I'm not going to do that. So in life, we are told to hoard things. We're told to hoard money. Whoever dies with the most toys wins. You know, that kind of an idea. We're told to have as much fun as we can before we die. I mean, if you've ever been hospitalized, there's definitely this temptation. People go to one or two extremes. One extreme, they go and they try to have as much fun, enjoy as much as they can, grab all that they can get before they die. Then the other extreme is they go, Chuck over there, well, I'm going to go on the keto diet and, get myself all healthy and gross crap like that. Ugh. Who wants to be healthy? By show of hands, who wants to eat spinach and broccoli and be gross? You all are liars, and God knows your heart. You liars. Nobody enjoys those things. It's like, let's have a big bowl of dirt. Man, green dirt. As if it's not gross enough, it's green. Man, like, that's just gross. Wait, man, oh man. Okay, all right. I obviously am a lone wolf in a pack of not wolves or something. I don't know, man. I don't know. I didn't have time to think of what I would say if people actually said that they wanted to eat broccoli. That's not something you can plan for. Like, I was writing this and I was like, wait. What if somebody says that they actually like? Don't be silly. Nobody's going to say that. Okay. But okay, we can at least agree that kale is pretty gross, right? Okay, thank God we have common ground again. Woo! You all eat it and you're like, ooh, that's not good. And then they're like, it's a superfood. Yeah, super gross food. You missed a word in that sentence. All right, okay. I'm more of a pomegranate guy. You give me pomegranates and pistachios and you leave me in my corner. We're all good, okay? We're told to live for ourselves. Watch out for you because nobody else will. We are told that we don't have to give thought to how we are affecting others with our lives, with our choices. Because I'm responsible for me and you're responsible for you. Hey, it's your own problem, right? That's what we're always told. We're told that it doesn't matter what legacy we leave when we're gone. It matters about how much we grabbed while we were here. All these things that I'm saying are completely anti-Bible, anti-God. I mean, just all these things are not true, and yet we're told them all the time. We see it in the commercials before the videos that we watch. We see it on the TV. We hear it on the radio. It's all about this, and it's hard to not have your bearings on, especially if you don't have a practice in your life of reading the Bible. Because had you been reading the Bible, you'd know that broccoli is in fact a sin. I had to. And oftentimes we ignore things of eternal value. We ignore things of eternal significance because we kind of get our attention focused on this one thing. I mean, think about this, how frequent it is for men to work our whole lives trying to climb the ladder of success, and then we get older, and it's like we're outdated by younger guys who can do our jobs better than us, evidently, is what they tell us. I don't know. I thought experience was of value, but I guess not. And and then we die of heart attacks. Typically, men die in their 60s. So it's like, well, that's great. So I worked my whole life to get here just to die of a heart attack. That's great. I'm glad I spent my whole life focusing on a job that didn't even care about me. I mean, think about this. You die, and they're going to hire somebody else within the end of the week. Man, oh man, that's a great thing to throw your whole life away. And I'm not saying don't work hard, don't be diligent. I'm not saying those things. Work hard, benefit your boss, all those things. Those are great things. But remember that life is more than work. I mean, there's more to your life. When you die, there will be a legacy left. You can't control that. What you can control is what kind of a legacy am I going to leave? What am I going to leave? What's going to matter? There's going to be a whole lot of squabbles and things that you felt very passionate about that nobody's going to remember. It'll die with you. But then there's going to be other things that will extend long past when you're gone. And these are things that we're not really told about. Everything in our culture is about the flash, the glamour, jazz hands. And trying to get your attention on something, it's all about. I mean, if you've ever driven down Vegas, for instance, you see a bunch of flashing signs, and everybody's trying to outdo everybody else with their flashing signs. So they put their flashing signs on top of them. Here's a little networking tip for you. There comes a point when there's so much flashing that you just block it all out. But the thing is, you can't have a sign that doesn't flash, because at that point everybody else does. And so even though nobody's going to notice it, they really won't notice it if you don't have a flash. So, it's one of those things, I guess. But that's just the way our world works. None of these statements are true, though. Why hoard things and money when they're passing away, even as they're in our hands? Why live your life just to have as much fun when did you know that a little bit of a good thing is a really good thing, but a lot of a good thing is a really bad thing? If you make it your mission in life to do nothing but have fun, you will never have fun in your life. Do you know how rewarding it is to work a hard day? I mean a hard day. Where you go in the morning, you work hard, and you get back at night. There's a sense of satisfaction, especially, I don't know, I've never been a woman, so I can't really speak for you women. But I know as a man, there's something rewarding when you get home and you're like, yes, this was good. And that's something that we're not told. We're told, let's always look for the easier way out. And it's like, well, sometimes it's not worth throwing away your identity for the easier way. We're told to live for ourselves. Well, what good is that? Let's say I'm living for myself and I get cancer and die at 25. Well, what was the point of it all? See, the problem is we're so busy entertaining ourselves that we forget about the big questions. What is the purpose of life? Why am I here? What can I do? What shouldn't I do? Why should I do it? A lot of these things just aren't really paid attention to. They're kind of glossed over for the sake of entertain me. And so when we're talking about Jesus, we notice that there's something inherent in the person of Jesus that goes against everything that we're being told and everything that we want to believe. We don't really want to believe that there's a God in heaven that's going to judge us. We don't want to do that. What we really want to believe is we really want to believe that I can do whatever I want, whenever I want, and there's nothing you can say about it because my life is my own. If you don't believe me, you don't have to argue with me. Look at the proof of your life. If you don't pay attention, where does all your money go? To you. If you don't pay attention, where does all your time go? To you. Now, you can argue with me all day about, oh, no, I don't really believe that, but our actions will always speak louder than those arguments that we do. Now, we try to lie to ourselves to make ourselves feel better. I'm not really like that. I really love God. Don't lie. God knows your heart. We all want what's best for us. And God wants us to not live like that, not just for the sake of glorifying Him, but also he realized, I think, maybe, possibly, he realized that when we have so much pleasure, it's actually not pleasure anymore. Did you know that when He made Adam and Eve in the garden, the very first people, in the very beginning, He gave them a job to do? Before they sinned, before they fell out of the garden, they had a job to do. We weren't created for nothing. We weren't created to just sit there and twiddle our thumbs. We were created, look at the human body, for instance. Do you know what happens if you live an extreme relaxed life and you don't do anything with your body? Do you know just the amount of decay that happens? Do you know what happens when you stop exercising and stop doing things and stop dreaming things? What happens to your brain, for instance, how it gets harder and it's harder to think differently? Or how your body gets things like encrusted valves and stuff that are just, ew, gross. I want to eat butter and not have any Side effects. That's not how the human body works, though. So John 13:1, let's look at this. Just before a Jewish festival, Jesus knew that the hour had come for him to leave this world and go to the Father. Having loved his own who were in the world, he loved them to the very end. So here we have a statement about Jesus. He understood the time. You hear a lot of people talking about the end times nowadays, and they're talking about, how to tell the signs of the times and those kinds of things. Well, that has value, but what I'm talking about has, I think, a little bit more value than that. Being able to tell when your time. When is your time? See what I mean? This is something extremely more important. See, Jesus knew he came for a reason, and he acted intentionally. He acted intentionally. Now, that's going to be very important. I'm going to come back to the idea of intentional living. And he lived intentionally because he had a limited window of time. And here's the thing, we have a limited window of time. I'm not talking about the end times. Don't worry about the end times. Nobody knows when that's going to be. So put that aside. Now, we do know that within the next 100 years, you will be dead. Okay? That's something we do know. Do we know for a fact the end times will be in the next 100 years? No, we don't know for a fact. They thought 2,000 years ago that it was going to be in the next 2 years. Well, here we are 2,000 years later. We don't know when the end is going to be. But we do know that within the next 100 years, you will be dead. So that's, I think, a little bit more urgent. I could be wrong. So Jesus acted this way. He understood he had a limited window of time. We have a limited window of time. And this is what I'm saying. Do you know why I think that Jesus wouldn't have posted angry rants on Facebook? Now, I know that that's funny. Yeah, I know it is. But hear me out, okay? The reason why I think that he wouldn't have done that is because he was more intentional than that. He wouldn't have wasted his time with things that didn't benefit his purpose. See what I mean? It's like, have you ever seen a business that they don't know what they're doing? I mean, they know that they want to do something, they just don't know what they want to do. So they have a bunch of people doing maybe something, but nobody really knows the general idea of where are we actually going. What's the end outcome of what we're doing here? You know what I mean? Like, it's really easy to know what our church is about. It's hanging on the wall. Everybody here knows it by heart. Bringing people to God. What's the other thing? I'm just joking. Building for something as there was a joke. But okay, I understand it wasn't funny. I'll just move on. Nurse my wounds. So what was Jesus' purpose in coming? Well, it was, if I could narrow it down to two simple things, it would be a statement that Paul makes in the book of Romans, basically to prove that he was who he said he was. See, the book of Romans tells us that Jesus died to prove his righteousness because he had overlooked the sins before. So in a sense, Jesus had to come for the sake of his own name and his own glory and his own character. He couldn't be a liar. If I say, I'm going to come over to your house tomorrow and pick up trash, and then I don't go tomorrow and pick up the trash, that makes me a liar, right? Well, what would have been if God said, you are going to sacrifice these, give these sacrifices, and until the time comes and Jesus comes, and then Jesus never came? Well, that would have been a lie, right? So in the first thing that Romans tells us is that Jesus had to come for the sake of proving his own character. The second reason, which everybody knows, is to bring people to God. Jesus died to save sinners. That's it. Us. This was Jesus' entire purpose. So we can get a little bit more specific when we're talking about purpose, and let's talk about two things in particular. First off, Jesus planned for the future. He lived with purpose by planning for the future. He wasn't absorbed with today, with how he felt at the moment. He had this long view going on. And then the second way that we see his purpose is that everything he did it for a reason. There was a driving reason for what he was doing. He didn't just impact people in his life and leave a legacy when he was gone and then die and go to heaven. He also made an impact in eternity. and continues to have an impact in eternity because people are still coming to him. See, Jesus could have easily said, healing this person isn't really going to achieve my eternal purpose of bringing people to the Father, so I'm not going to heal her. Instead, he had compassion, right? And so he did things that impacted the people around him in his life. Well, if that was all he did, that's not really that. I mean, that's good, but I mean, that's not a very good end game. So then he also left a legacy. He established what would become the church. But then also he made an eternal contribution, bringing people to the Father, to eternal rest. One thing that we see over and over again with Jesus is that he didn't waste his time, he invested it. Jesus didn't waste his time, he invested it. So, I mean, he had a reason, and everything that he did came down to this question: is this my purpose? You don't see him getting sidetracked and going off to Rome to party it up in a brothel for a couple days. You don't see him doing that. Why? Because he acted intentionally with purpose. With purpose. Now, obviously, there's the whole divinity of God and that kind of stuff, and Jesus couldn't have sinned and all that kind of stuff. I don't want to get into that. Moral of the story being, he invested his time. In fact, you could easily say that every aspect of Jesus left something that was very valuable. In his living, in his dying, in his rising, in his coming again, every aspect of Jesus, he invested wisely. Hebrews 12:2 says this, and I know I'm talking about Jesus like he was just a man. The reason why I'm doing that is to help you to learn from him. So just to kind of bring it all in, we're all clear that Jesus is God. He always has been God. From the very ever, I don't know how else to say that, from ever, he was always been God. We're all on the same page? Okay, good. So now that we understand that, I'm not saying that Jesus was not God. I'm not saying that when he was here on earth that he set aside his godhood. No, he was always God, okay? I'm not saying any of those things. So, fixing our eyes on Jesus, the pioneer and perfecter of faith, for the joy set before him, this is talking about Jesus, he endured the cross, scorning its shame, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Did you hear what he just said? For the joy set before him, for the outcome of what would be produced, he endured the cross, letting go of the shame, just dealing with it, living through it, and sat down at the right hand of the throne of God. Now, why is that important? Because, well, if you read the rest of the book of Hebrews, he's talking about how Jesus is our intercessor. We don't have saints that intercede for us. We don't have angels that intercede for us. We don't have dead relatives that intercede for us. We have Jesus. Now, why does it have to be Jesus? Because Jesus is God. You can't have a man intercede for a man, because a man needs intercession. So what are we going to have, a domino effect of we're all going to be interceding for each other for eternity? I mean, that's not going to work. And so Jesus didn't act with impatience or rashly. He planned for the future, and it even tells about some of the problems that he had the night that he was going to be arrested. And it's just a lot of the different big issues that he was having to deal with, the stress of all that and the betrayal and all that stuff. Now, I'm not saying he didn't see it coming. I'm not saying that, but he did still have to endure it. John 5:19 says, Jesus gave them this answer, verily, truly, I tell you, the Son can do nothing by himself. He can do only what he sees his Father doing. Jesus didn't chase after what felt good, but did what would accomplish his purpose. His life wasn't oriented around himself. It was oriented around his purpose. He planned for the future. He had a mission to do. He had a reason for living. He had a reason for coming. Luke 23:34, this is Jesus as he's, his last moments on this earth before he came back before the book of Acts. He came one more time. He just kind of tell them, well, adios, amigos. But, I mean, you know what I mean. Jesus said, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. So this is Jesus getting ready to die. Everybody's kind of laughing at him, and he makes this statement. So rather than wasting his life on himself, he invested it in others for the glory of God. Even to the point that it wasn't fair, it wasn't fun, it wasn't something that everybody's waiting to do. Hey, can I do that? It wasn't something that would, he was being made fun of. It wasn't like, oh yeah, that sounds fun. I mean, if there's a line of where we sign up to be made fun of, I'm pretty sure none of us is going to do that. And so here we have Jesus, rather than wasting his life on himself, he could have said, oh man, I hope that they burn in hell. Man, they'll be sorry. They'll rue the day that they did this. You don't see him doing that. Now, imagine the level of stress that he's under as his physical body is getting ready to die, and he knows that he's getting ready to die. This is a very intense situation, and rather than cursing his enemies, rather than, calling a curse down on them and telling them they're all, 40 llamas wake up with you in your bed tomorrow or whatever. Instead of whatever that, he says, Father, forgive them, for they do not know what they are doing. And that just right there shows the essence of the person Jesus. You can tell a lot by people will tell you a lot of things about themselves. They'll promise that they'll stay with you till the end. They promise that they're faithful, that they'll never leave you, and all this kind. This is how you know the character of Jesus. Not that he told lies very cleverly. Not that his rhetoric was like a politician's. No, this is how you know Jesus, that in his death, he stayed on purpose. He stayed on point. Even in his death. You have to ask yourself, what was in it for him? From a human perspective. If you're dying on a cross and your whole purpose is just so that people will love you and whatever, like a cult leader, like, what happened in Waco, for instance, you don't really need to go that far. You know what I mean? But here we have Jesus, and he's not, like, abandoning the, like, oh, gotcha. Like, no, he's still sticking his guns. And then as if anybody had any doubts that maybe he was just blowing smoke, he did raise from the dead. So that kind of put the proof in the pudding, and now there's an empty grave. So it's like, well, what are you going to say now? I mean, come on. So Matthew 15:24 says, he answered, I was sent only to the lost sheep of Israel. And I'm taking this verse out of context, so I don't want you to go and read it later and say, you took that out. I know I'm taking it out of context. I know that. And that's because I'm just trying to prove a point here. Jesus knew his purpose, and he made decisions, he lived, he acted, and talked in ways that aligned him with that purpose. And my point is this. So I've said abundantly clear that Jesus did things intentionally. Do we do things aimlessly? In your life, are you doing things aimlessly? Now, if we actually think about this, just hold on, think about this. If I do post that mean, hateful comment on Facebook, that would be talking aimlessly. Talking mean and hateful to someone online, it doesn't fulfill my purpose in life, does it? See what I'm saying? Getting in a nasty fight and having to have the last word in something, that doesn't fulfill my purpose in life, does it? That's just aimless. Sometimes people go to one or the other extreme, and I just want to kind of give a warning about this. It really doesn't have too much to do, but I just wrote it down in my notes, thing about this. Sometimes people get overly focused on the end times, and they can't focus on anything else, and they just kind of forget that they are living a life here. And then other times people go to the other extreme, and they just think that all that there is their life right here. So you might want to just be careful when we're talking about living with purpose, that you don't get caught up with nothing but the end times or caught up about nothing but living in the moment here. I mean, there's a time continuum thing going on. I mean, if you want to know more about that, you can watch Back to the Future. It's flux capacitors and all kinds of stuff. That's a joke. That's just a joke. Luke 10:38 through 42 says, as Jesus and his disciples were on their way, he came to this village where a woman named Martha opened her home to him. She had a sister called Mary who sat at the Lord's feet listening to what he said, but Martha was distracted by all the preparations that had to be made. She came to him and asked, Lord, don't you care that my sister has left me to do the work by myself? Tell her to help me. Martha, sorry. Martha, the Lord answered, you are worried and upset about many things, but few things are needed, or indeed only one. Now listen to this, okay? Mary has chosen what is better. Martha was doing good, Mary was doing better. And it will not be taken away from her. He's not just saying, I'm not going to stop what she's doing. He's trying to tell Martha there's something else bigger going on here. Now, if you're anything like me, you're probably thinking, that lazy little turd, she went up and got brownie points with Jesus while I'm in the kitchen doing all the hard work. It's all fun and games until y'all are hungry and there's nothing to eat. You know, I get you, Martha. I got you. You and me, we're solid, man. I got you. But that's not really what's happening here. See, laziness is doing nothing. Mary isn't doing nothing. She's doing something more important. Did you catch the difference? See, because in our minds, we think it's all about the to-do list, right? I got to be as productive as I can before I die, so then when I get to heaven, I can show God this really long list that I did. For whatever. I don't know, whatever. But that's not what we're talking about here at all. Mary wasn't being lazy. She was doing something better than Martha. And that's what Martha wasn't getting. And that's why all the striving that Martha was doing would be taken from her. But what Mary was doing would not be taken from her. Very important little point there. There will always be things to do in life. There will always be things to do. But our purpose cannot revolve around a to-do list, but around God and the eternal. I understand that we all have to work, but we don't have to live for work. I understand that we need money in this life, but we don't have to live for money. I understand that it's nice to have things in life, you know, like a book to read, for instance, but we don't have to live for books. See what I mean? When your purpose is revolved around something in the world versus around God and his kingdom and his ways. So John 9:4 says this, as long as it is day, we must do the works of him who sent me. Night is coming when no one can work. And I don't really want to talk about all the things that he's mentioning here. I just want to take the principle that he's mentioning here. He mentions the nighttime that's coming. Well, for each individual also has their own night times, right? As you get older, your body gets slower, right? You can lift less. You eventually wake up later. You eventually get more tired. See what I mean? There's just this natural thing that happens to our bodies, and that's okay. You're not in competition with who you were, just in case you didn't know that. Another good example is this. Quarantine. Who foresaw quarantine coming? Anybody? Nobody? Okay, all right, I didn't think so. Would you say that quarantine was a night when nobody could work? I would kind of say so, huh? It was unforeseen. It was a night that came that nobody could work. So you know what we did? We said, well, we're going to paint stuff and change stuff and stuff. Take that. People are like, don't visit us. You could have the rabies. The cooties. the COVID. And we're like, well, fine. We'll just paint something or something. Or dig a ditch or something. That's what the guys do whenever they get upset, like, and they get in a fight with their spouse. Whenever they're like, I'm going to go outside and dig a hole, and that's what they do. They get their pickaxe and they dig a trench and like, what are you doing? I'm working on a project, and it's like, oh, okay, well, what's the project for? I'm digging a hole. And I don't know. Guys just have this thing. We like to prove our superiority by digging holes. Maybe it's so that when you come out to see what we're doing, you'll fall in the hole. Another night that comes is death. We all will die. Every one of us will die. And we don't know when that time is, but the truth remains that when we're dead, we really can't get much done in this life, can we? I don't think so. I think we'll be doing a lot of decomposing, and that's just about it. So obviously that leads to a very important statement. Don't wait until it's too late to live with purpose. Don't wait until it's too late. So let's kind of wrap up some things here, okay? In our interaction with others, in social media, in politics, do we talk for a reason? When we're talking about these different things, do we talk for a reason? I'll go over them again. In our interaction with others, how we talk with people, in our social media presence, in our discussions on politics. Are we saying things for a reason? Is there a point behind our mouth being open? Too often, we just want everybody to know our opinions. We want to say as much information about something as quickly as we can. We want everybody to know how we feel about something, right? Are we talking for a reason? Or is our conversation unguided, aimless, pointless, and some might even say fruitless? Are we tearing down or building up? Do we plan for the future not just retirement, but with what we say? Jesus said it like this, that every word that we say, we will have to give account for. That's a big statement. Too many times we tear down pastors or fellow Christians, and then something happens, like either they commit suicide, or they quit the church, or they give up on ministry, or they go the rest of their life looking back at that time as something that permanently scars them, and we don't even think twice about that. We don't realize that other people could be fighting their own wars. See what I mean? We don't realize that people could be dealing with just a lot of crap, and we could be the straw that breaks their back. See what I mean? There's just a lot of things that we just don't take into account on the day-to-day basis. Are we talking for a reason? Are we talking for a reason? Especially in 2020, we've got this idea that the point of life is just in staying alive as long as we can so we can say as much stupid stuff as we possibly can. I have to hurry up and stay in my house so that I don't get to live my life, so that I can say a bunch of stupid things and tear people down. And if somebody doesn't agree with me, then they're an idiot. One thing that I've definitely learned in 2020 is, you ever get to a place in your life when you're like, man, I'm doing pretty good. I think one thing that 2020 has definitely taught me, we weren't doing very good. We thought we were. But then, they put this pressure on the dam, and the levee broke, and all kinds of bad things are going, and then there was somebody singing American Pie, and the whole thing just fell down the drain. Oh, my goodness. When we face struggles, when we face inconveniences, when we face pain and disappointments, do we see those things in light of eternity? Do we see it in light of eternity? So often we deal with these things, and we treat them like they're the end of the world. Oh, well, my kid did this. Well, they're not dead yet. They could still make other decisions in their lives. Well, but they always make the wrong decision. But you don't know that they always will. You just know that they always have. There's two completely different statements. So, or what about our health? We start feeling bad. I always feel bad. This will never change. Well, don't give up yet. First off, I'm not even talking about healing now. I'm talking about we do have an eternal home to look forward to. This is something that shouldn't be like well, I've got nothing else but misery, and I hate everyone, so I guess I'll just talk about heaven all day. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about, having that joy that can't be taken from us. Jesus said it like this: don't fear those who can do nothing more than take your life away in this earth. That's all that they can do. Do we make decisions that honor God on purpose? Do we positively impact others and try to? What legacy are we leaving? Paul said that he was convinced, he's long dead now, but he said when he was still alive that he was convinced that the things that we're going through are as nothing in comparison to what we will encounter in heaven. It's not even comparable. There's a lot of people who are bedridden, who've been betrayed, who've had to deal with death in their family that they just haven't ever bounced back from, or just a big loss that has kind of left them cracked like a shell. But I think that we oftentimes forget this. We can still have purpose even though we're bedridden. We can still have a life that has purpose. Now, see, what we do is, I can't do the things that I used to, therefore I can't do anything. I can't do the things that someone else is doing, therefore I can't do anything. Those are not true statements. But the thing is, we tell ourselves that they are true. I don't know why, probably for many different reasons. But the truth is that it doesn't matter where you are in life. You never come to a point when God says, dang it, I can't use them anymore. That's never going to happen. In our living and our dying, God can always use everything. And if you don't think so, you are drastically limiting God's hand. Not actually limiting it in your own mind. What you believe isn't going to change God's character. we were laughing this week, Chuck and I, about this stupid book it was called something like Releasing God to do what you want him to do in the courts of heaven or some nonsense like that. I was just like, what? It was wild. Anyways, we can, and also here's another thing, we can still plan for the future. You might say, how can I possibly plan for the future when I have to deal with this situation? Well, the first step to planning for the future is to stop whining about the present. If your eyes are always on the present, you will never plan for the future. Remember that. It says that Jesus, now let's think about this, what I just said. It says that Jesus, pay attention to this, okay? Hebrews 12:2, right here. For the joy set before him endured the cross. So that means that while he was dying, while he was going through this painful experience, he was focused on the future. You hear what that just said? That means that even when he was in the moment of his greatest need and pain, he was still planning for the future. So how does this apply to you? See what I'm saying? See what I'm saying? I hope you see what I'm saying. Okay, because it's late. It's like 12 o'clock. People are going to start falling asleep, falling out of windows. Thank God we're on the bottom floor. If you want to plan like Jesus, you have to have a purpose. And if you want to have a purpose in life, you have to ask this very foundational question. Do you want to live for God or do you want to live for yourself? Now, we say, I want to live for God. But remember, if you want to live for God, that means you can't spend your money however the heck you want to. That means you can't live your life however you want to. That means you have to start caring and loving other people. See what I mean? That means you have to start revolving your world around God instead of having God as a box in your life that occasionally you open every time that you're in need. Well, I have a need in my life. I'm a little short on rent, so now I'm going to pray to God, and He's going to give me money out of heaven so that I can pay my rent. God is not a genie, and when we reduce Him in all of His glory and majesty to nothing more than what can I get out of this relationship, we are drastically missing the greatest asset that we could ever have. If Jesus is our master, how can we tell? If we were gone, what would people remember about us? When we get to heaven and everything here is gone, what would we be taking into heaven? If you can't take things into heaven, then what would we be taking into heaven? Now, these are rhetorical questions. Those are questions that I'm asking to get you to think about something, not to get you to answer. So, just in case you didn't know that. How did we use those things that we had? See, some of us have money. Some of us don't. But if we have money, how did we use our money? Some of us have things. Okay, how did you use your things? Some of us have skills or talents. How do we use those skills or talents? See, what we think is somewhere along the lines of this. I'm poor, I don't have as much money as this other person, therefore I have nothing to contribute. See what I mean? Maybe you have something else to contribute. Right? Doesn't that make sense? I mean, I think these things are like spot on. I keep hearing myself talking. I'm like, man, Right on, dude. I told my mom when I was a kid, you don't have to encourage me. I encourage myself. Just kidding. I don't know. That was an imaginary conversation. Like 90% of the stories that pastors tell are fake anyways. So, I figured I should be able to make up a story too. Everybody else is doing it. Gosh. So really the heart of the culture clash, did we look at all that? Yeah, we did. So the heart of the culture clash we've been looking at for the past 5 weeks, the crux of the issue, you will either intentionally live for God by following Jesus, or you will unintentionally live for yourself. Well, I'm a pretty good person, and then you do this for yourself. Well, that's okay. I mean, it's not as bad. At least I'm not as bad as that person over there. Did you know that they're one of those? They do that. Never mind. No, I'm going to say it. Obviously, I'm talking about the people who eat broccoli. And that's really what it all comes down to. People think oftentimes that people who don't follow Jesus they're just like, they are aware that they're rebelling against God. Now, some people are aware that they're rebelling against God, but I've found more often than not, people don't really even realize that. They think, it's not that I'm saying no, I'm just saying not yet. I'll go to church someday. I'll read my Bible someday. See what I mean? It's not necessarily always a thing about no. Sometimes it is, but a lot of times it's more of just living for yourself, not considering anything else. My life is all about me. It's something unintentional that we just slip into. And here's the scary part. Right when we thought that we were better than somebody else, even Christians fall into this. Rebellion always starts with an accidental rebellion before it moves to steadfast rebellion. It happens in stages. People don't just wake up and decide, I'm not going to worship Jesus anymore. It's a series of things. So now that I've said a lot of things and some other things and then some things after the things,